and welcome whoever is watching this talking recording. I'm Tatьяna Fanштейн. I'm very happy to be giving a plenary talk the second time online here at YARConf. And my talk is going to be about creating comfortable learning space online, choices. Before we get started, I would kindly ask you to create a very comfortable learning space for you right now, because you can't learn anything about creating learning space if you don't feel comfortable yourself. If you feel peckish, just grab something to eat. If you are eager to drink something, take a cup of coffee to comfort yourself and to feel at ease, because it's really crucial to be able to listen to my talk. So off we go. Aren't we great professionals at creating comfortable learning space offline? Yes, we are. We do adore using all this stylish stationery, wonderful carpets for our kids, nice cushions, and laminated flashcards. We do provide our students with everything we can. They have no choice but to get our tender loving care we are ready to give them. But then March 2020 started, when we were kind of forced to go online. What about that? Do you think we kind of have lack of choices while teaching online? In my talk today, I'm going to widen the variety, the array of choices and options we have while teaching both online and offline, adults and kids.
Хотите постоянно развиваться в преподавании иностранных языков? Школа Дмитрия Никитина проводит образовательные тренинги, конференции и курсы для преподавателей. Подробности о событиях можно узнать по ссылке в описании.
Why me? I'm Tatьяna Fанштейн. I've got an online school. We have about 200 students, both adults and kids. I'm an online school owner. Besides, I'm a very devoted English teacher. I teach very young learners online, groups of very young online currently. Besides, I'm a parent of a learner who is studying both online and offline. It might seem weird. That's a very weird contradiction that I've been preparing this talk, for about half a year, talking about creating comfortable learning space. But my son is not provided with any learning space by the moment because he's not given a place by a public school. Well, there are things we can influence and we can't influence. So let's try to create comfortable learning space where we can do it. Besides, I'm a learner. Long life learning rules, so I'm still learning English to be able to talk at conferences and just for my everyday basis in a group of advanced learners in my own school. We do teach with pleasure, and I learn a lot from the lessons, and probably at my talk you will be able to look at the learning process from different angles. So I see the educational process as a parent, as a learner, as an English teacher, and as an online school owner. So what today we're going to do is we're going to cover different number of choices and things we can do with our online and offline learning. I would like you to look at the choices we face while teaching and learning, and creating some space where your students will feel at ease and where you teachers will be eager to provide them with this comfortable learning space, whether teaching online or online, kids or adults. And I've got the first question for you. What do you see in the picture? So can you please stop the recording, take a quiet minute and write down, take a note, write down what exactly you see in the picture. Probably you will come up with an answer that you see a plant growing, and there is a watering can and there is a fertilizer. So probably the sun is shining, everything is fine. Then I have another question for you. Do you think it's easy for the plant to grow? Again, take a quiet minute and think. Of course, we do need the context. We all know about lexical approach. We can't judge, we can't pass judgments without any context, but still. So let's just imagine that probably it is quite easy for the plant to grow when it's taken care of. It's provided with this, tender loving care. It doesn't have to think about anything because there is a professional gardener who can take care of these very plants. And it's absolutely true because it is grown up in a greenhouse where everything is set, everything is chosen for the plant. No need to think. What about here? What do you see in the picture here? So probably you will come up with an answer that you can see some kind of jungle, some kind of forest, and a lot of different plants who can compete with these very plants, some unknown creatures or animals who can pick this plant up. Probably it's boiling hot, so the plant has to provide itself with enough liquids. Yeah, it has to get some fertilizer to be able to grow further and better. So it has to struggle, it has to survive. You are absolutely right, because it's jungle. What about this picture? Take a quiet minute and write your own associations with the picture you can see on the slide. Probably you will come up with ideas that this is a boy learning something, probably, hopefully learning a language in a classroom. And if I ask you if it's easy for the boy to learn, probably you will think that it is. So it might seem a bit boring, but it can be easy because it's learning offline. So the boy is in the classroom, he's provided with everything he needs. The room is well equipped. It's got a clock, it's got a blackboard, the book. So probably we can't see some realia that they are going to use for the games, but let's say, yeah. So it's quite easy for him to study. So, and I do associate with this kind of learning and teaching with the greenhouse you've just seen before. What about the second picture? Probably you will come up with some idea that it is not so easy for the child to study because there are quite a few things happening in his life at the very same time. Like he's learning online, that's clear. Probably he's learning a language. But besides, there are lots and lots of things happening. There is a mom passing by with his favorite cake, and he can sniff its wonderful smell. There is a cat, his favorite pet, on his lap. So there is always, this temptation to stroke, to pat the cat, to play with the cat instead of the lesson. There is this mouth-watering apple that just is asking the student to take a bite. TV on, lots of things happening. So it reminds me of the jungle, if you ask me. And if we come back to the association with the plant, I see a clear connection with learning online and offline. When I was a teacher of offline students, I had this, parking place where my students, my very young learners, used to leave their personal belongings and things before they get started, before they start the lesson, because I didn't want anything to distract my students from my lesson, from the skills I'm going to instill in them. Of course, it was okay for students because they were able to pick their belongings after the lesson, to pick them up and go home. It was absolutely fine. So I didn't use any distractors. They were kind of put in a greenhouse by me, the gardener. So when we talk about learning and teaching online, the situation is the contrary. So it's absolutely the opposite situation. And my question is, the greenhouse or the jungle? What's your choice? This metaphor was inspired by Richard Caldwell. If you are interested, you can Google this name. He's got a lot of researches and books based on audio and teaching listening. He's a great scientist. But what I came up with was the metaphor that if we think of teaching and learning offline as a greenhouse, then teaching online looks more like a jungle to me. In my case, if I put my students in the greenhouse, in the classroom, they don't have any distractors, they don't have any particular choices, but to look at me and to listen to me. They have nothing else but to do it. But in the offline classroom, there is always something happening in their own life. And it's absolutely natural that things are happening. There is always something more fascinating than your particular lesson. And it's life. It's absolutely fine that there is probably some telephone ringing, Probably there is mom calling their younger brother, or probably there is their dad passing by. So it doesn't matter. The life is happening there. And I have no particular option to put this life away. What if when we teach our students offline, they have no choice but to look at you? But in the case of online learning, we give them this variety of choices. Isn't it way more flattering if among all these wonderful things happening, for some reason, they choose you and your class? So I do prefer walking in the jungle and working in the jungle. The most depressing moment of my whole career was the following. When I started teaching online and I had this, 6 students in my classroom and 1 empty Zoom window. I had 5 students who were engaged, really eager to get something from me, looking at me with the blink in their eyes, they were kind of passionate to do something, but 1 student missing. And me sitting there looking at this empty Zoom window with my 12 years of experience of teaching very young learners and not being able to do anything about it. So here, me as a teacher, I did have choices. Start tearing my hair out of my head and blaming myself to be a failure, the worst teacher ever, or just let the life of my students happen and go on teaching. Let my student take his own pace and come back to me when it's comfortable. So if there is something important in my presentation, probably this is this slide, because my key ideas here are that we are to choose the greenhouse or the jungle, and we might change the options while learning or teaching, and we might provide our students with the room for choosing them. We do have choices. Hopefully, by the end of the session, the array of choices you face every single day, teaching in your own context will widen. And definitely, our world is not black and white. We don't have one-fits-all solution or approach. And I do hope you will come up with some ideas that will work for your particular context. You always know better as a teacher and as a learner. So let's make our choices.
Хотите постоянно развиваться в преподавании иностранных языков? Школа Дмитрия Никитина проводит образовательные тренинги, конференции и курсы для преподавателей. Подробности о событиях можно узнать по ссылке в описании.
My favorite question for you, and the first question I would like to come up with, is: does 100 involvement exist? Do you think it does? Or do you think it doesn't? Probably as an experienced teacher, you will say that it doesn't. Tatьяna, what a weird question you ask us. Of course it doesn't. But I have another question for you. How much do you think you are involved now in listening to my talk? Do you think you are involved like 80% out of 100? Or maybe 60, or let's be honest, 50? Say you are probably scrolling down the feed in the social media, which must not be named, or you probably might be mulling over the information you got today, or you might be planning your evening with your partner or whatever. So anyway, we can't be focused on any particular task 100%. So the maximal rate which my students, which my teachers I teach in my teaching courses give me is 60. Let's be realistic. So 60 is usually the maximum. So if we teachers who are quite good learners, and if you are watching this now in recording, you are probably eager to get something from this talk. If we are able to include only 60%, so what do we want from our students? That's a very good question. So in this pair of choices, to involve our students as much as possible or to let them learn at their own pace, as always, the choice is up to you. My choice is the following: to let my students be involved as much or as little as they want and let them make their choices. That's absolutely natural for me when a student of 5 or 6 years old starts looking for something at his desk, or starts wanting to do something else, looking out at the window. And it's our rapport, our build, which we are working on together with my students, is to charge. So we have to, I don't have to pull myself together and start using these wonderful attention getters. Or I might be just letting life happen. In my case, I help my students get to know their pace. You know what? I'm a very, very slow student. I'm a very, very slow learner. When I could get my head around this idea, it helped me a lot. All the learning process improved a lot because I didn't have to keep up with the group, and it wasn't connected with my level of learning. It was connected with my personal pace. So it's very, very natural and very useful for your students get to know their own learning pace and let them learn at their own pace. Take their time. Besides, I, as a teacher, choose to create the learning space, the comfortable learning space, where both slow and fast students can feel at ease. And of course, we teachers can feel at ease too. I have another couple of choices for you. Do we have to follow the syllabus or work on practical skills? You might be thinking, Tatiana, what a weird question. Of course, working on practical skills, who doesn't know it? You know, you can see on the slide a wonderful picture of the greenhouse of my mom in the countryside. She's quite a gardener, and these, cucumber plants are quite happy to be grown by my mom as a gardener. And do you think they know better what they need? Or do you think my mom, as a gardener, knows better? I've got another question here for you. What does actually the term practical skill mean in your own context? Let's try to compare practical skills for a student and practical skills for us as a teacher. So we might see them in different ways. I've got a couple of examples here. For example, I, as a learner, my personal aim is being able to give a talk at conferences like this in English. There is no particular course, there is no particular course book which is aimed to bring me to my learning goal. So my teacher has to work on this particular skill and organize our course in a way that would help me come to my personal goal, to my lesson, to my studying aim. What about such a thing as chatting up a girl in a bar? When I was starting my career, in the beginning of my career, I studied an American guy, Russian. And he kept telling me, Tanya, don't even bother teaching me the structures and the vocab that I'm not going to use to chat a girl up in a bar. That's a very practical thing, isn't it? Absolutely, it is. So if you ask me as a teacher, I would have never come up to this idea. So if I didn't ask him, I had to restructure my course at the very moment I heard his requirement. And well, you can easily guess that there are no course books covering this particular aim. So we have to restructure our course in a way. What about such a thing if you talk about kids, very young learners, counting to 100? Does it seem to be very practical? So probably it doesn't. If you ask me as a teacher of very young learners, it is not so practical. I would definitely focus more on other things, on letting my students learn some useful structures like, can I have, or do you like, or have you got, so whatever. I would never focus on counting to 100 with my very young learners, especially if they're novices in learning a language. But I have another story here because my son is learning French at the moment. He's a very beginner. And he believes it to be very practical, highly practical skill to count to 100 in French because he can brag among his peers. It is very practical for him. Just come up to somebody in a yard or in his kindergarten and say, can you count to 100 in French? And I can. So that's very, very practical for him. And I, as a teacher, would never thought of this idea. Besides, if you know French, you're probably familiar with these crazy numbers. When you are an adult, you have to be good at math, at least, saying something like 4 multiply 20 plus 10 plus 9, which is 99, which is 99, which is absolutely crazy if you're an adult. But if you are a kid, you just want to show off among your peers and you don't care. You just learn it by heart. So it's really very, very practical. My choice here is definitely get to know my students' real context and needs. And don't forget to make sure I follow the changes. When I started the course with the American guy, he didn't have the slightest idea of his learning goal, because by that moment, he had just come to Russia. And he thought just because he's in Russia, he wants to know something about Russian language. Gradually, he met a lot of beautiful women in Russia, and he changed his lesson aim, his course aim. He ended up being forced to marry a Russian woman and having 3 kids, but that's another story. Let's not stop here. Anyway, we can change our courses according to changes in our students' life. We can do it, and this is my choice. I've got another couple of choices for you. What about encouraging parents in the learning process or managing without them? If you are a teacher of kids, or if you are a parent, can you please answer this particular question? Would you like to be involved? If you ask me, I wouldn't. I would be involved as least as possible, because this is their relationship. This is my son's and his teacher relationship. It is their rapport. I don't want to be involved. And I've got another question here. Do you think a parent is an assistant or a participant of the learning process? Just a question for you to mull over. And there are quite a couple of choices while living and working in the jungle. Letting parents stay in your classes while teaching both online or offline, or kindly asking them to leave. So as a parent, I can tell you that if you are in this very room where your child is learning something at this very moment, it's terribly difficult to avoid the temptation to push him to answer something because the teacher is asking. When you hear as a parent calling your child's name like, Alyosha, what's this and what's that? Do you know the answer? And he keeps doing something like, la, 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 just paying attention to his pencil, playing with some nice toys, or just going under the desk this way, and you feel furious. Come on, Alyosha, why don't you do it? So it takes me a lot of, efforts to pull myself together and just not jump in. So for me, it's always better to stay out instead of staying in. Let them learn, just don't jump in. This is my choice as a parent, but there are different situations. For example, I remember teaching very young learners offline, and I had a kid whose comfortable learning space offline included his mom. She didn't jump in, she didn't interrupt, she didn't do anything, but she had to stay in the room just to be seen. It was the zone of comfort of this particular boy. I remember teaching him for about 3 years, and it didn't change. So she didn't participate at all, but she had to be there. So it was the comfortable learning space for the kids. And if it's done this way and it doesn't stop you from learning or teaching, why not? So we are to choose. But there are things we can't influence. For example, some children can't stay without their parents when they challenge any kind of problem. In my particular group of very young learners, I've got a girl, every time she faces any particular challenge or problem, she yells at the top of her lungs, Mom! So nothing to do about it first. So you can't influence it. Of course, as a teacher, I have an option, mute her, or I have an option to work on it gradually. So what I choose to do as a teacher, work on it gradually. I can't influence their whole relationship, but I can influence their relationship and their interaction in a lesson. So I can show the girl that she's able to manage without her mom absolutely herself. And every single lesson, I come back to it in our little feedback sessions. I'll come back to it a bit later in our talk. That, Paulina, can you believe it? Today you can do this and that without your mom. What if we try the next time to do this and that? I think you will be good enough about it. She starts spotting little and big things she's able to do without her parent, and it's absolutely fine for her. Enjoy the progress, to feel that she's already growing and she's really able to do this and that without her mom. Of course, it will be more efficient if you start working with the same thing with a parent at the same time. So, but again, it's your choice. In my case, I do work on it gradually. So what I do is getting to know my students' real context and needs, let them learn and let them manage without their parents included, because parents have a lot of things to do, much more interesting than helping their kids with English, probably. And I ask them to collect their realia for the class. So I do have this list you can see on the screen. They have to bring it and they have to prepare it beforehand, before the class. And I do encourage my kids to do it themselves, not to include their parents. They get the list, so they have this, English box where they put all the realia for their online classes, and they have to prepare everything themselves. So I do motivate them, I do encourage them to do it. Another couple of choices is about the planned vocabulary or the emergent language. So if you are teaching adults, of course, you work a lot on emergent language. And at this very conference, you've listened to a wonderful talk on emergent language as well. But if you are a teacher of kids, probably you don't work with it as much as possible. And I've got a question for you here. For example, this is the book Super Safari 3. By Cambridge, and it is supposed to be for kids of 6 or 7 years old, and the topic toys covers the following vocab: teddy bear, rope, doll, kite, ball, play. Do you think children of 6 or 7 years old now play with all these toys? Depends, but some of my students didn't know what the rope is. They didn't have a chance to play with it at all. And when we talk about kids, and when we talk about toys with kids, they came up with some things I didn't have a slightest idea about. So do you know what this is called in any language? I didn't before my students brought it into the class. It's called a screecher. It's something in between a transformer and a robot. What about this one? Some kind of unicorn. And I've got this wonderful girl in my online group who pronounces its name as a tongue twister: Rarity Rainbow Butterfly Unicorn. Are you able to do it right now? So you can just stop the video and try to do it. Rarity Rainbow Butterfly Unicorn. So all my students have learned the name and have practiced their pronunciation when one of my students brought it into the classroom. And this you definitely know. So what I choose in my case is letting students bring things from their real context and let their peers learn about their peers' context as well. It's really interesting, more than the average student. The book, the course book usually focus on some average students, which I don't have in my classroom. And no matter how old your students are, they do bring personal stories into the classroom, and a lot of emergent language comes out. When I was teaching an adult student who was elementary, and we started talking about past tense, and we came across the word was, she burst into tears. I didn't understand what was happening, and it came out that her father had passed away 3 years ago, and she wasn't able to admit it. She said, Tatiana, by that moment, I was telling you that I have a father, but in reality, I don't. He passed away 3 years ago. So she burst into tears. At that very lesson, a lot of emergent language came out. So we spoke about, she got a lot of support words and phrases she learned at that particular lesson. So my choice is obvious. I choose to be more a human than teacher in some cases and focus on my students' real needs and context. What about such a weird question as teaching for now or teaching for the future? There is a weird opposition. When we teach adults, we do focus on some kind of clear aims for the course. For example, they come to us mostly or usually when they want to be prepared for the interview in English, or when they want to relocate, or when they want to take a test in English, take an exam. So whatever, they have some particular aim, which is somewhere there in the nearest future. The other way around, the situation looks the other way around when we talk about kids. For some reason, we prepare them for distant future. If you teach very young learners, as I do, you prepare them for primary school, for school English. If you teach primary students, you prepare them for ÖGE and YGE. If they have passed already ÖGE and YGE, you are preparing them for wonderful, attractive, mouth-watering adult life, which is about to happen. But what if it doesn't? I learned it in a hard way. I've got a bitter example here. My student, my 6-year-old student passed away in a car crash about a year ago. And it got me thinking while grieving about lots and lots and lots of things. Was my focus shifted? Was I focused enough on the present, or was I teaching her distant future, which never happened to her? What if our students never have this wonderful future we're preparing them for? So my choice is definitely now obvious. It's teaching for now, and there are quite a few things we can, and quite a few ways we can do it. For example, clear is obvious. My students love making salads and cooking in my lessons while learning food. And parents of my students were very thankful to me that their kids got such a skill as making a salad, because they were provided with salads for quite a time in their families. Besides, your students, no matter how old they are, might learn from your lessons some tech skills, emotional intelligence, memory operation, and a lot of collaboration and communication and learning to learn skills. We as teachers do have choices, as always. If we are teaching our students to be patient, for example, to raise their hand when they want to say something, we do have choices. We can mute them, the easiest solution, or we can gradually work on them and literally show them how it can help them now, right now, and how they can be tolerant to their other kids who are speaking. One more thing you can learn, and your students can learn from your lesson, is listening to yourself. You might be asking, Tatьяna, what do you mean by listening to yourself? What a weird collocation. So I strongly believe that we teachers sometimes make our students make this weird, tough choice to choose me as an English teacher or to choose their body, which I don't want to make them. I have a task for you. Can you please stand up right now? You don't have to stop the recording. You can just listen to my instruction. Fingers crossed you follow my instructions. So can you please stand up? Thank you very much. Can you clap your hands? Yeah, can I kindly ask you to clap your hands? Well done. Can you turn around? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Can you touch your nose? Thank you very much, well done. But now I have another task for you. Can you clap your hands if you want? Can you turn around if you want? Can you touch your nose if you want? I think you've spotted the difference. The difference is obvious. If you help students focus on their body needs and on the things they really are eager to do, you might notice that they can be tired or exhausted by this moment and they don't want to stand up. And it's absolutely human and it's absolutely okay in my classes. You might say, Tatьяna, it will ruin my classroom management. You know, in my case, I see it as an opportunity for new wonderful language and structures to learn. So my choice is obvious, and there are quite a few structures we can learn while not doing something. For example, I'm not clapping my hands. They might be saying, I don't want to. or I'm not in the mood, which is a very useful and nice structure for your learners, no matter how old they are. Here, the choice might seem to be a bit weird. So to eat or not to eat. Of course, we choose to eat. Of course, we as teachers choose not a hungry, unsatisfied student to a full student who is satisfied with everything that is happening in the lesson. In my case, what I like about this thing is that I have this snack time every single lesson in my classroom. And to be honest, don't tell anyone, I would love to have such a snack time when I'm a student. So I would love to have this, something that I can eat, something that I can drink, and to be able to talk about it while eating. This kind of activity can be applied to students of any age or any level, no matter how old they are. It is some kind of respect to their and your body needs. These are definitely skills for here and now. So when I feel perkish, I can just grab a piece of apple, continue eating, and continue my English class. It doesn't ruin my classroom management. So it's absolutely fine because it's life, which is happening. It is shared responsibilities because it's them who have to provide them with food. You just talk about it in advance. A lot of emergent language and extra opportunities for speaking come out. So I do use it a lot in my classes. My choice is obvious. What's yours? One more pair of choices is using English only or using bits of Russian. And I'm not talking about instructions. It clearly can be done. It clearly can be done in English without a shadow of a doubt. But what about some moments which can happen in everyone's classroom? So we as teachers have choices here. To start seeing yourself as lazy or reluctant to do something or not professional enough, or get the best out of it. In my case, I had a situation, I think the third or second online class with my very young learners, a girl of 4 years old. We start our lesson with a typical question, how are you? I ask her, Christina, how are you? I'm not fine. Why? Меня мама только что побила. And she burst into tears. And I got all the class staring at me, not knowing what to do. And I can't come up and hug her because it's online classroom. So do I have to psych myself up, pull myself together and stick to the lesson plan? Or do I have to support her and give her something that she's in a desperate need of? Just tender loving care right now. The choice is up to me as a teacher. So my choice is using English during the class, have these bits of Russian when necessary, if necessary. In reality, it doesn't happen very often. And using English before and after the classroom. Here at this conference, you've listened to quite a few talks about feedback, how to give feedback to students. But what about feedback from students to you? While teaching and working with adults, for some reason, we're kind of worried. We don't expect them, we kind of, I would say worry about negative feedback. What if our students didn't like the lesson? What if they say something bad about us? But working with kids, for some reason, we don't expect them to do it. So what I usually see teachers asking for feedback from kids is something like this. Kids, did you like my lesson? So they have no choice but to say, yes, I did. Yes, of course. So we don't provide them with the room for negative feedback. For example, now, if I ask you, do you like my wonderful talk? So are you able to say, no, not really, Tatьяna, you're saying rubbish? I'm not sure it's so easy. So in my case, I do choose to provide my students with the room for negative feedback, letting them learn gradually what they really think and what they really want to say. I take notes. And while listening to my students while teaching, I take notes and I come up with these notes in these little mini feedback sessions after the class. If I spotted that it was difficult for this particular student or he faced some challenges, I come back to it in our feedback sessions and we talk about it. The final choice here that I wanted to offer you is be sincere or wear a happy mask. In my case, while teaching teachers, I am usually asked such questions as, Tatiana, what do I do if I don't feel like smiling today in my lesson? What if my child has just thrown a tantrum in a shop and I can't psych myself up for the lesson and I have to smile and start jumping and start saying that everything is fine? For me, my choice is to be sincere because we are all humans. So in my case, in my teaching context, it brings way more opportunities to learn your new language. It helps me build a better rapport, and it shows my students that I'm not a teaching machine, I'm a human. And that's a very, very important message for me. I have a friend who is learning German, and she's also a teacher. And she recently told me that she has had recently the best lesson ever. What lesson was it? It was the lesson, an individual class, when her teacher, while greeting her, burst into tears because her daughter had been bullied. And my student, because her teacher didn't understand any other language but German, had to give her a lot of support. And she learned really much at this very lesson. Through emotions, her memory operation things could help her remember this really well. And she learned really much about it. And she still believes this was the best lesson ever she has ever had. So my choice is obvious, letting yourself and your students be a human, not a machine.
Хотите постоянно развиваться в преподавании иностранных языков? Школа Дмитрия Никитина проводит образовательные тренинги, конференции и курсы для преподавателей. Подробности о событиях можно узнать по ссылке в описании.
I do believe Mr. Albus Dumbledore is quite right when he says that we are what we choose. And this is our choices that show us what we truly are, far more than our possibilities. And I do believe the pandemic, I'm very thankful to the pandemic, which brought us a lot of new possibilities, whether you are teaching online or offline, kids or adults. It kind of widened the array of choices and options we all face. So I choose the jungle. The jungle is my favorite place to live. I choose to stop looking for one-fits-all solution, and I choose to make my conscious choices and let my students make theirs. Very well-informed choices. I choose to choose. Thank you.